On July 8, 2019, a husband and wife slept on mattresses beside their own house in Trona, California. The house had been declared uninhabitable 3 days earlier after a magnitude 7.1 earthquake. Trona was not the outlier. In June 2012, Stockton became the largest city in American history to file for bankruptcy after its tax base fell by roughly 70%. California is the richest state in the country. 6 of its metropolitan areas appear on all 3 of the American Lung Association's worst to 25 air quality lists. Los Angeles is one of them. 10 towns made this list. We start at number 10, a town built on a dry chemical lake where the high school plays football on bare dirt because nothing will grow. Stay until number 3. One town here holds a world record for something the weather should not be able to do. I am not going to tell you what fell there. If you like the places America talks about without ever visiting, subscribe. We post one of these every week. Today, 10 of California's most hated towns and what the people who live there say back. Number 10, Trona, the town that plays football on dirt. You come in on State Route 178 across a long stretch of empty desert, and the first thing that registers is the white. A dry lake bed, flat and bright, stretching further than it should. Then the stacks. A chemical plant sits on the edge of that lake bed, running, steaming, humming at a pitch you feel more than hear. Past the plant, the streets begin. Some of the houses on them are lived in. Many are not. Windows gone, doors gone, wind moving through the gaps. And behind the school there is a football field with painted yard lines and no grass on it anywhere. Not dead grass. No grass. Bare dirt, dragged flat, cleared of stones, watered down on game days by the school maintenance crew so it is safe enough to tackle on. The team calls it the Pit. It has been reported nationally as the only all-dirt football field in the United States. The reason is chemistry. Trona sits at the western edge of Searles Lake, a dry lakebed packed with commercially valuable minerals, and the same salt that made the place worth building makes the ground hostile to anything green. Searing heat, heavily saline soil, grass dies. Artificial turf blows away in the Mojave wind. So the school stopped fighting it and painted the lines onto the dirt instead. For years, the town golf course ran on the same logic, all sand with greens made of a softer grade of brown dirt. John Searles started digging borax out of that lakebed in 1863. The town itself was established in 1913, built from nothing by a company that needed workers on site. Housing, a school, a library, a grocery store, wages paid in company scrip. It took its name from Trona, the mineral underneath it. Searles Valley Minerals runs the soda ash plant today, and that plant is still the entire reason the town exists. Many of the people who work there now live in Ridgecrest and drive in. Then, July 2019, a magnitude 6.4 earthquake hit on the 4th. A 7.1 hit on the 5th. They were the 2 largest earthquakes in Southern California since 1999. And they landed on a town of somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people that was already holding on by its fingernails. Trona's drinking water arrives through pipes laid above ground from Ridgecrest. The pipes cracked. The town went close to a week without water, in July in the Mojave. Rock slides closed the roads in. The plant stopped for the better part of 2 months. The high school took enough damage that the students were moved into part of the elementary school building. That is the couple from the start of this video. Their house was red tagged, so they slept outside it on mattresses, with family and trucks parked beside them, waiting. You can still drive there. The plant runs. There are small museums, an annual mineral show, and a high school that had 116 students on the roll in the 2022 to 2023 year. A few miles south, the Trona pinnacles rise straight out of the lakebed. More than 500 tufa spires, some of them 140 feet tall. Trona has been bought, sold, resold, stripped of services, and shaken twice in 48 hours. And every season, somebody still goes out with a water truck and a drag and makes the dirt smooth enough for kids to fall on. Number 9. Bombay Beach, the resort at the bottom of America. There is still a billboard here advertising water skiing. It is not a joke and it is not ironic art. It was put up when that was an accurate description of the place. The water it refers to left decades ago. Bombay Beach sits on the eastern shore of the Salton Sea, 223 feet below sea level. That makes it the lowest community in the United States. 231 people live there at the 2020 census. In 2010, it was 295. In 2000, it was 366. The direction has not changed in a long time. The strangest thing about standing there is the sound. It looks like a coastline. It does not sound like one. The Salton Sea was an accident. In the early 1900s, a dam failed, Colorado River water poured into the Imperial Valley, and it stayed. For a few decades, it behaved like a real lake. Marinas, water skiing, celebrity weekends, shoreline lots selling fast. Bombay Beach was built for that version of the future. Then the only thing feeding the lake became agricultural runoff. Salinity climbed. The fish died in numbers you could smell from the highway. The resorts emptied. From 1999, the sea began genuinely receding, and that is where the story turns from sad to serious, because the shoreline it exposed was not sand. It was decades of accumulated farm chemicals and metals settled on the lakebed and now drying in the sun. The water carries fertilizer, heavy metals, arsenic, and selenium. The wind picks up the dried version and carries it into town. Here is the detail that stops people cold. Researchers at USC and UC Irvine tracked around 700 children in this region and found that the blowing dust is impeding their lung growth, with effects larger than what studies find in urban California communities next to busy roads. A 2019 USC study found that 20 to 22% of children in the region had asthma-like symptoms. That is roughly triple the national rate. A 2025 report from the Pacific Institute found the playa dust is only part of it. Ozone, hydrogen sulfide, algal blooms, black carbon, landfill fires, unpaved roads. The air in that basin is a combination problem, and it is not resolving quickly. People still live there. It has become a small art destination with sculptures and installations set among the rusted trailers, and Audubon, California is building 564 acres of wetland on that shoreline, targeted for 2028. A town that spent 40 years being mocked for smelling of dead fish is now the subject of published epidemiology. Nobody who lives there needed the study. Number 8. Stockton. Most miserable twice. In 2009, Forbes named Stockton the most miserable city in America. In 2011, it did it again, making Stockton the first city ever to top that list twice. A magazine turned the name of a river port of roughly 290,000 people into national shorthand for failure. Then the actual failure arrived. During the housing boom, Stockton bet on itself. A redeveloped waterfront, a new marina, a sports complex, and generous pension and healthcare packages locked in for city employees. The assumption was that the growth would keep paying for all of it. Then the foreclosure wave hit the Central Valley harder than almost anywhere in the country. Lawyers for the city later said the tax base fell by roughly 70%. The city cut first. It spent 2 years in a declared fiscal emergency, stripped $90 million a year out of its expenses, laid off nearly half of its non-safety employees, and cut wages by as much as 23%. It was not enough. On June 28, 2012, Stockton filed for Chapter 9 protection and became the largest city in United States history to go bankrupt. The largest since Cleveland in 1979. Creditors fought the filing. A federal judge approved it in April 2013 after a 3-day trial. On the eve of that filing, a photographer shot the entrance to Stockton City Hall, the light standard by the door leaning at an angle, the whole building looking like it had already conceded. Down on Weber Street, the storefronts were boarded. What bankruptcy looked like on the ground was quieter and worse than the headline. The police force lost about a quarter of its personnel in 3 years. Libraries closed. Parks closed. That same year, Forbes ranked Stockton the 8th most dangerous city in the country. Unemployment had peaked at 22.3% and was still 17.5% in 2012. One detail rarely survives the retelling. After Forbes first handed the city that title, a Stockton resident made a rebuttal video and put it online. While the finances collapsed, people were arguing back in public about their own town. Stockton exited bankruptcy in 2015. The waterfront is there. The marina is there. The arena is there. All of it built during the boom that broke the city. All of it still in use. The city paid for those things twice, and it still shows up to use them. Number 7. Adelanto, the city with unlimited possibilities. That is not a nickname somebody gave it. That is the official motto, and it is printed on the welcome sign at the edge of town. Adelanto sits in the Victor Valley, high desert, about 2,868 feet up. Flat in every direction, Joshua trees, the dry Mojave riverbed, and a freeway you can hear but not see. The wind is the loudest thing there, and that is not a figure of speech. There is very little else to hear. The name is Spanish for advance or progress. Land was bought here in 1915 for a planned community that never really took. What kept the place alive was George Air Force Base. When the base closed in the early 1990s, Adelanto lost its main employer and its main source of revenue in a single move. What it still had was cheap, empty land next to a freeway. That is precisely what the incarceration industry buys. A former state prison inside the city limits was sold to the GEO Group in 2010. In May 2011, GEO contracted with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. After a 2015 expansion, the Adelanto facilities can hold up to 1,940 people, making it the largest immigrant detention facility in California. 3 incarceration facilities now sit within the city limits, including San Bernardino County's High Desert Detention Center, which opened in 2006. None of it fixed the budget. Each deal solved a year. By 2014, the city was $2.6 million in the red, the Christmas parade was canceled, and officials were seriously discussing dissolving Adelanto entirely and folding it into neighboring Victorville. A city was considering ceasing to be a city. Then came the next bet. In 2015, Adelanto became one of the first cities in California to permit commercial cannabis cultivation, zoning an industrial stretch of town as the Green Zone. By 2017, more than 40 grower permits had been issued. Through all of it, the sign stayed up. A reporter for the Project on Government Oversight visited and noticed what that sign looks like from the other direction. People arriving at the detention center passed the city with unlimited possibilities on the way in. He described it as reading like a cruel joke. Adelanto is an active city, 38,046 residents at the 2020 census, facilities operating, cannabis growing, litigation ongoing. Every town in America puts something hopeful on the sign at its edge. Adelanto is the only one I know of where the sign became the argument. Number 6. Bakersfield, the air capital. 2 things arrived in Bakersfield with the Dust Bowl. One of them was a sound. Families came out of Oklahoma and Texas in the 1930s looking for farm work, and they brought a harder, twangier kind of country music with them. By the late 1950s, Buck Owens and Merle Haggard had turned it into the Bakersfield Sound, the West Coast counterweight to Nashville. The other thing was everybody else's dust. Bakersfield sits at the closed southern end of the San Joaquin Valles with a wall of mountains to the south. Whatever the valley produces collects there and has nowhere to go. Agricultural dust, diesel off the freight corridor, oil field emissions, wildfire smoke. That is the actual mechanism. It is not one villain polluter. It is geography. The American Lung Association's 2026 State of the Air report ranks Bakersfield-Delano the worst metropolitan area in the nation for year-round particle pollution. That is 7 years running. The 2025 report had it worst for year-round particles for the 6th consecutive year and worst for short-term particle spikes for the 3rd, at 16.2 micrograms per cubic meter. In the 2026 report, it also came 3rd for short-term particles and 3rd for ozone. 6 California metro areas appear on all 3 of that report's worst 25 lists. Bakersfield is on every one of them. In 1996, Buck Owens opened the Crystal Palace on the boulevard that now carries his name. A 550-seat music hall and museum, built so the sound would have somewhere permanent to live. Garth Brooks proposed to Trisha Yearwood there. On August 11, 2025, the Owens family announced it was closing for good, citing a difficult business climate. The final concert was that September, The city that has topped America's dirtiest air list for 7 straight years lost its most famous room in the same stretch. The building is still standing, closed, and locals are still hoping somebody buys it. The permanent Bakersfield sound exhibit sits at the Kern County Museum. The music survived the migration, the valley, and the smog. It was the restaurant business that finished the venue. If you are finding this interesting, drop a thumbs up. It genuinely helps these get seen. And tell me in the comments which California town you have driven through and written off without stopping, because half the places on this list are places most people only ever see through a windscreen. Number 3 is still ahead. That is the one I mentioned at the start. Number 5. El Centro, the jobless capital of America. In August of 2024, the El Centro metropolitan area posted an unemployment rate of 20.2%. That was the highest of any metropolitan area in the United States. The lowest that month was Sioux Falls at 1.9. This is not new. El Centro had the highest metro unemployment rate in the country in 2023 at 17.3%. In August 2021, it was 19.4, also the highest in the nation. Imperial County's annual average in 2017 was 19.1%, the highest in California. In April 2026, the county sat at 16.5%, against 5% statewide and 4% nationally. Here's the thing, that number is not measuring a collapse. It is measuring a calendar. Imperial County grows winter vegetables and it grows an enormous quantity of them. Agriculture there is $1 billion a year industry. The season runs roughly October through April. After April, a large share of the workforce either follows the harvest north or waits at home for the next one. The county is the 10th largest in California by land, and it is cut off from every other job market by desert and mountains. There is nowhere nearby to absorb an off-season, so every summer the headline number goes vertical, and every summer the town gets described as the worst job market in America. What the number does not capture is how badly people there want the work. When a new hotel opened in El Centro, it received more than 2,000 applications for 50 jobs. The town sits below sea level near the Mexican border, a rectangle of irrigated green and raw desert. Summer temperatures well above 100 degrees, the imperial sand dunes to the east. The county's diversification bet is Lithium Valley, pulling lithium out of geothermal brine at the south end of the Salton Sea. El Centro also appears on all 3 of the American Lung Association's worst 25 air lists. 2,000 applications for 50 hotel jobs. Whatever that place is, it is not idle. Number 4. Barstow, the place everyone drives through. Millions of people go to Barstow every year, almost none of them mean to. It is the halfway point between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, which means most Californians experience it as a fuel gauge decision. That reputation is recent, and it is the exact reverse of what the town was built to be. Barstow started as Waterman Junction, a mining hub in the late 1800s, and took its current name in 1886. It existed because everything had to stop there. Steam trains needing water and crews. Then Route 66 motorists needing a meal before the long run east to Needles. In 1911, the railway opened the Casa del Desierto, a Harvey House hotel and depot designed by Mary Coulter, the architect behind the Harvey House at Los Angeles Union Station. It was built to be the Fred Harvey Company's premier stop in the West. A ballroom, a lunch counter, and a dining room with a dress code in the middle of the Mojave. Then the interstates arrived and turned a destination into a fuel stop. Santa Fe closed the station in the early 1970s. Artifact hunters stripped the fixtures, squatters trashed the rooms. By the late 1980s, the railway was planning to demolish the building. Local outcry stopped that. The city bought the property in 1990 and began restoring it. And then, the day before the rededication ceremony in 1992, the magnitude 7.3 Landers earthquake struck and destroyed the building's unreinforced brick towers. So they restored it again. It was retrofitted and reopened in 1999, and it now holds the Route 66 Mother Road Museum, the Western America Railroad Museum, city offices, and an Amtrak stop. Barstow's Main Street murals were painted for a related reason, to cover storefronts that had gone empty and boarded. Out past town, NASA's Goldstone complex, one of only 3 deep space network sites on Earth, sits listening to spacecraft. Barstow saved that building twice, once from a wrecking ball, once from an earthquake, for a town most people only ever see at 70 miles an hour. That is not the behavior of a place that has given up. Number 3. Needles, where it rains at 115 degrees. This is the one. On August 13, 2012, at 3:56 in the afternoon, rain began falling on Needles, California at a temperature of 115 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the hottest rain ever recorded on Earth. The humidity was 11%. According to the weather records researcher Maximiliano Herrera, that is the lowest humidity at which rain has ever been observed anywhere in recorded history. Most of it evaporated before it reached the ground. Only a trace registered in the gauge. Rain fell on the town and largely did not arrive. The previous record was 109 degrees, held jointly by Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and Marrakech, Morocco. In July 2018, Imperial, California briefly took the title at 119 degrees until the National Weather Service in Phoenix examined the data, found the sensor had malfunctioned, and expunged the reading. The record went back to Needles. That is not the only number there. On June 20th, 2017, Needles hit 125 degrees, tying its record high. The town sits on the Colorado River at the Arizona line, a strip of green against bare Mojave under the jagged peaks it is named for. It was the gateway, the first California town for anyone arriving by rail or by Route 66, and in 1908 it got the El Garces Depot, called the crown jewel of the Harvey House chain. Then the interstate took the traffic away. Its most famous export was an accident. A boy named Charles Schultz lived in Needles for about 2 years, around 1928 to 1930. 45 years later, he put Snoopy's scrawny, desert-dwelling brother Spike out in the desert outside Needles. Spike was first mentioned in the strip on August 4, 1975, and first shown on the 13th. The town took the gift and ran with it. There is a mural, there is signage. For years, a large figure of Spike stood inside a Subway sandwich shop in town before it was moved to the Needles Regional Museum on Front Street. A town of under 5,000 people holds the world record for the hottest rain in history and keeps a cartoon dog in a sandwich shop. Both are true. Only one of them was on purpose. Number 2. Coalinga, Coaling Station A. Most Californians have met Coalinga without stopping. You are on Interstate 5 somewhere in the long, boring middle of the state, and the smell arrives before the exit sign does. That is Harris Ranch, a very large cattle operation just east of town near the freeway, and it has done more for Coalinga's reputation than anything the town has ever done itself. The name is stranger than the smell. In 1888, the Southern Pacific put a coaling station on this spot, back when locomotives burned coal hauled from the foothills of Mount Diablo. The stations were lettered. This one was A. The most repeated story is that railway signs shortened Coaling Station A to Coalinga, and the name simply stuck. The city's own website disputes that. Their version is that a railroad official added an A to Coaling to make it sound better, and they point out the area was briefly known as Coaling O. Nobody can settle it, and there is a reason. The records that would prove either version burned in the San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906. The city was incorporated that same year, carrying a name it can never fully explain. Coalinga has had worse days than an argument about spelling. In May 1983, a magnitude 6.5 earthquake destroyed more than 300 buildings, severely damaged around 700 more, and left residents days without utilities. What the town chose to be known for instead is the Horned-Toad Derby. 3 days over Memorial Day weekend, racing locally caught horned lizards, running since 1935. It also hosts the Wamabass Balloon Rally every November, billed as the longest consecutively running annual hot air balloon rally in the world. The coal went. Most of the oil went. Downtown fell down once. The lizard races are 90 years old and counting. Number 1, Modesto, the town that banned its own movie. In 1990, the city that inspired American Graffiti made it illegal to do the thing American Graffiti is about. George Lucas grew up in Modesto. The 1973 film, one of the most successful of its decade, is built directly on his memories of cruising 10th and 11th Streets in the early 1960s. Driving up and down, slowly, in a car, on a Friday night, for no reason other than that everyone else was doing it too. By the late 1980s, cruising in Modesto had stopped being local. Cars came in from other cities, as many as 5,000 of them on some nights, and police reported shootings, assaults, and substance abuse along the route. The council meeting on March 27, 1990, drew more than 500 people. More than 30 news outlets covered the decision. The ban passed, and it applied mainly to McHenry Avenue, the main strip. So the town Hollywood had used to represent American teenage freedom became the town where you could be cited for driving up and down your own street. It stayed that way for 33 years. What ended it was not a lawsuit. It was a slow negotiation. The ban had barely been enforced for years. Police met with car clubs, ran test cruise nights, watched nothing go wrong, and changed their position, pointing out that other cities, including Sacramento, had repealed their bans without any increase in crime. At the same time, a bill was moving through the state legislature to end cruising restrictions across California entirely. On July 11, 2023, the Modesto City Council voted unanimously to repeal the ban, effective immediately. On Saturday, July 15th, a city employee walked downtown and lifted the last no cruising sign off its post. And then the mayor, who had just voted to lift it, told a reporter what she remembered about cruising McHenry Avenue in her junior year of high school: a yellow convertible Impala. Other cruisers hopping into the car, singing. Cruising is legal in Modesto again. Graffiti Summer runs in June. The American Graffiti Festival runs. The Graffiti USA Museum is open on North 9th Street. This is also a city that has been on Forbes' most miserable list and has been ranked the worst metro area in the country for car theft per capita more than once. It is also on a warm evening full of people driving nowhere on purpose with the windows down because the city finally admitted that was always the point. That is what it sounds like when a town wins an argument with its own reputation. Slowly, in first gear. California is easy to hate from the outside and easy to defend from the inside, and this list started at the deep end on purpose. Trona, the Salton Sea, a bankrupt city. For me, it is Trona. A dirt football field that somebody waters before every home game tells you more about a place than any ranking ever will. Which of these surprised you, and which town did we miss? If this kind of forgotten American history is what you are after, subscribe.